All right, night owls and frostbite enthusiasts, buckle up. Or should I say, zip up your parka. We're embarking on a wild ride to the Arctic, where the air is so cold it slaps your breath back into your lungs, and the sun takes a 6-month vacation like it's got better places to be. We're crashing the party of the Inuit people, who didn't just eke out a living in this icy wasteland. They threw a full-on glow-up building, a civilization out of snow smarts and sheer "we got this" energy, before we plunge into the deep freeze. Smash that like button if you're vibing with this frosty adventure, and drop a comment telling me where you're chilling tonight. Are you snuggled under a pile of blankets sipping hot cocoa while we dive into the iciest chapter of human history? That's the kind of cozy irony I live for. Now crank up the heater, fluff that pillow, and let's teleport to a place where comfort is a DIY snow fort and survival is the ultimate flex. Picture this. You wake up, your heater's kaput, the power's out, and the nearest Home Depot is 500 miles away across a frozen hellscape. Most of us would yeet ourselves into a blanket burrito and pray for Amazon Prime to deliver a miracle. The Inuit. They'd roll their eyes, mutter "amateur hour," and get to work. For over 4,000 years, these Arctic OGs have made the tundra their home. Not because it was a cute Airbnb option, but because they had a PhD in making it work. The Arctic was their canvas, and they painted a masterpiece with nothing but ice and attitude. This place is a monochromatic fever dream: white snow, gray sky, and the occasional "oh, look, an iceberg" moment. The thermostat laughs at minus 40 degree F, where tossing hot coffee into the air turns it into a glittery snow cone before it hits the ground. Your breath. It doesn't fog, it freezes midair and clinks to the snow like nature's tiniest wind chimes. The Arctic isn't exactly rolling out the welcome mat. It's more like Mother Nature screaming, "You sure about this, pal? Meet my polar bear bouncers, they're hangry." But the Inuit weren't fazed. They looked at this frozen nightmare and said, "Hold my seal, blubber, we're moving in. Endless ice." That's just free real estate. Howling winds, perfect for long-distance group chats. 6 months of darkness. Prime time for epic storytelling and bonding so tight it'd make a reality show jealous. Their secret sauce. They didn't arm wrestle the Arctic. They waltzed with it and they led. Forget arguing with contractors over subway tiles. Try building your crib out of frozen H2O with nothing but a snow knife and grandma's wisdom. The igloo isn't just a house, it's a middle finger to physics dressed up as a snow pile. Building one is like being a snow sommelier. Too fluffy and your walls flop like a bad souffle. Too dense and you're hacking at it like it owes you money. The Inuit could sniff a snowbank and tell you its life story. This one's 2 days old, kissed by a west wind, perfect for load-bearing walls. They'd start with a perfect circle drawn with their boots like Arctic architects, then carve blocks in a spiral that'd make a modern engineer weep. Each block was cut with surgical precision, angled just so, locking together without a single nail or dab of glue. The final keystone block. That's the "don't mess this up" moment. Nail it and your igloo's strong enough to host a polar bear rave. Flub it and you're sleeping in a very fancy snow cone. Here's the kicker: once you're snug inside, your body heat works overtime. The inner walls melt just a smidge, then refreeze into a glassy shield that's tougher than your ex's grudges. You're not just living in an igloo, you're its life support, turning a snow hut into a toasty fortress. Inside, while the Arctic tantrums at minus 40 outside, you're chilling at a balmy 60 degrees, probably sipping seal soup, and wondering why the rest of the world's still messing around with plywood and drywall like it's the Stone Age. The Inuit didn't just stop at building ice palaces, they pimped them out with serious style. Picture ice shelves for bunk beds, ice blocks for chic minimalist furniture, and soapstone oil lamps fueled by seal or whale blubber, flickering like the Arctic's version of mood lighting. Those flames danced shadows across the curved walls, turning a frozen igloo into a cozy, golden-lit vibe that screamed, "Yeah, we live in ice, and it's fabulous." But hold up, living in an igloo wasn't all snuggly Instagram filters. You needed fresh air without turning your snow condo into a walk-in freezer. Windows' cute idea, but no. The Inuit's fix was a tiny hole at the dome's peak, basically the world's simplest HVAC system. It let stale air sneak out and fresh air creep in without eating all your precious heat. Snow knife engineering for the win. Then there's the entrance. You can't just carve a door like some rookie that'd bring the whole igloo down like a bad Jenga move. Instead, they dug a sneaky tunnel that sloped down from outside, then up into the living room. This was a cold trap, a genius hack using physics. Cold air, being a heavy drama queen, sulks in the tunnel while the warm air chills upstairs like it's too cool to leave. It's an airlock that would make NASA jealous, designed by folks who never met a rocket, but knew the Arctic's rulebook by heart. Staying toasty was only half the battle. Food. Good luck finding a drive-through. The Arctic's grocery scene was basically seals, the occasional lost caribou, and whatever you could convince to swim close enough to harpoon. Seals were the MVP of Inuit survival, but catching them was a test of patience that'd make a sloth look fidgety. Seals need to breathe, so they keep tiny breathing holes in the ice, like secret trapdoors in a frozen ocean. Inuit hunters had to find these pinprick holes in a sea of white, then play the world's most intense waiting game. We're talking 8, 10, 12 hours of standing stock still, harpoon ready in weather so cold it'd make a yeti cry. Dressed in gear from past hunts, they turned into human icicles, masters of zen and frostbite defiance. When a seal finally popped up for a quick gasp, it was go time. You had seconds to nail a harpoon shot with sniper-level precision. Miss Hope, you like fasting? Hit jackpot. That seal was a walking Walmart, meat for dinner, blubber for lamp fuel and snacks, skin for clothes and boats, bones for tools and needles. Waste nothing because the nearest craft store is a 500-mile dog sled ride away, and trees. Yeah, they're on permanent vacation. Inuit hunters were basically ice whisperers. They could read the tundra like a thriller novel, spotting thin ice pressure ridges or the faintest hint of a seal's favorite hangout. They knew caribou travel plans better than the caribou did, predicting herd movements days in advance, like Arctic psychics. Now, let's talk fashion. Modern layering is cute, but Inuit winter gear was life or death couture. Their outfits were thermal engineering so slick they'd make Gore-Tex blush. The outer layer caribou skin fur out loud, laughing off wind and snow. Inner layer more caribou fur in trapping heat like a personal sauna. This combo let hunters shrug off temps that had turned the rest of us into popsicles in minutes. The details were next level. Sealskin boots that told water to get lost. Mittens that kept fingers toasty and let you grip a harpoon like a boss. Parkas with hoods that created a face-hugging microclimate, keeping snow out and warmth in. Inuit women were the masterminds behind these survival suits, chewing sealskin until it was softer than a baby's blanket, sewing with bone needles and sinew thread. One bad stitch and your family's frostbite risk went through the roof. Crafting these garments was an art form passed from mother to daughter like a sacred recipe for not freezing. Stitches had to be tighter than a reality TV plot twist, one loose seam, and the cold would sneak in like an uninvited guest. Fit was everything too snug, and you're waddling like a penguin. Too loose, and your heat's gone faster than a bad Tinder date. Kids rocked mini versions of adult gear, and pregnant moms had parkas with built-in baby pouches, wearable cribs that kept infants snug against mom's warmth. This wasn't just clothing, it was architectural fashion tailored for Arctic survival. And here's the kicker, it was 100% sustainable. No polyester, no sweatshops, just materials from animals hunted for food. Gucci, who Inuit style, had zero carbon footprint and maximum swagger. But the real magic wasn't the tech, the hunts, or the haute couture. It was the Inuits' squad goals. In a world where teamwork was the difference between life and death, they built a community that makes modern sharing as caring look like toddler tantrums. Kill a seal. The meat got divvied up with rules so fair everyone ate. Elders weren't just respected, they were survival gurus, their wisdom sharper than any harpoon. Kids learned to hunt, sew, and read the sky like it was a weather app, navigating by stars and decoding the ice's mood swings. In the long Arctic nights, stories were the ultimate currency. Families huddled in their toasty igloos, swapping tales that weren't just campfire vibes, they were survival cheat codes. Wrapped in folklore, these stories taught you how to dodge blizzards, track animals, and not get lost in a whiteout. The Inuit didn't just survive the Arctic, they threw a masterclass in living, and we're all just trying to catch up. Say goodbye to the Inuit's frosty paradise, and hello to a sun-drenched land where the Nile River slathers green streaks through a desert that's basically a giant sandbox. We're in Egypt, where Cleopatra VII. The last pharaoh was staring down the ultimate boss battle, keeping her ancient kingdom from going kaput in a world that was changing faster than a chariot with new wheels. Cleopatra didn't pop out of the womb planning to run the show. She was born in 69 BCE into the Ptolemy dynasty, which had been Egypt's VIPs for 3 centuries. But by the time she took her first breath, their empire was crumbling like a papyrus scroll left in the sun too long. Imagine Alexandria back then, not some sleepy port, but the ancient world's glittering superstar. The lighthouse was so tall it doubled as a neon sign for ships 35 miles away. The great library was bursting with scrolls, making it the nerdiest hotspot this side of the Mediterranean. Scholars flocked from everywhere to nerd out over math stars, medicine, and big thoughts. And in the royal palace overlooking this brainy paradise, a young girl was learning that being royal didn't mean a free pass. It meant your life was a drama fest with extra hieroglyphics. The Ptolemies, Cleo's fam, had been calling the shots since Alexander the Great croaked, and his empire got divvied up like a prime rib at a super awkward banquet. But here's the wild part. These folks were obsessed with keeping the family tree, let's say, tightly pruned. They married their siblings like it was a competitive sport. Cleopatra's dad, Ptolemy XII, went by flute player, either because he was a musical genius or because his people thought he was blowing hot air instead of ruling. Her mom, probably another Ptolemy, because that's how this crew rolled history's fuzzy on the details, and frankly, it's too messy to untangle. Palace life was next-level bougie, making today's tech moguls look like they're shopping at the dollar store. Marble floors that stayed cool despite Egypt's oven vibes. Gardens where exotic birds from Africa and Asia chirped like they were in a sci-fi soundtrack. Servants who knew you wanted a fig before you even thought about it. But all the bling in the world couldn't shield you from Ptolemaic family feuds, which were spicier than a marketplace chili stand. Forget the Roman gossip about Cleopatra's looks. Those guys couldn't handle a powerful woman without making it about her eyeliner. What made Cleo a legend was her brain, which was sharper than a freshly carved obelisk. While other royals were busy posing for frescoes, she was hoarding languages like a kid collecting rare trading cards. She spoke Egyptian mind-blowing since she was the first Ptolemy in 300 years to bother learning the local lingo. Her ancestors were too busy sipping Greek wine to care. She nailed Greek for courtly banter, Latin for Roman deal-making, plus Hebrew, Arabic, Ethiopian, and a few others that she tossed around like verbal confetti. These weren't just cool party tricks. Every language was a power-up, unlocking new worlds and loyalties, chatting with an Egyptian farmer in his tongue. That's how you win hearts, flirting with a Roman diplomat in perfect Latin. That's foreign policy with a wink. In the palace library surrounded by scrolls that smelled like dusty wisdom, young Cleo devoured statecraft philosophy, math, and rhetoric. Papyrus and ink were her vibe, the scratch of reed pens her personal lullaby. But no amount of scrolling could prep her for the Ptolemaic Hunger Games. When her dad bit the dust in 51 BCE, 18-year-old Cleopatra was stuck co-ruling with her 10-year-old brother, Ptolemy XIII. In normal families, this might mean squabbling over who gets the comfiest chair. In Egypt, it meant marrying your kid, bro. Yep, tradition and sparking a civil war. The plan was to tie the knot and rule as a dream team. The reality, Cleo was ready to slay as queen while her little bro was fed "you're the real king" nonsense by slimy advisors. Toss in some courtly backstabbing and you've got a mess that makes modern politics look like a polite tea party. 3 years later, Cleopatra was sneaking out of Egypt like a fugitive influencer, dodging paparazzi, hightailing it to Syria with just her smarts charm and a grudge hot enough to melt a pyramid. But Cleo had a secret weapon. When your kingdom's a hot mess, think big, think global. Enter Julius Caesar, swaggering in like Rome's headliner, chasing his rival Pompey across the Mediterranean in a high-stakes game of ancient hide-and-seek. Caesar hit Alexandria expecting to find Pompey. Instead, the Egyptians handed him Pompey's head like it was a gruesome party favor, thinking this'll score points with the Roman big shot. Wrong move. Caesar's schemer fighter PR wizard wasn't about that murder vibe. He wanted to look like Mr. Mercy, not the guy who collects heads like trophies. Cue Cleopatra pulling off the gutsiest play in diplomatic history. She had herself smuggled into Caesar's crib, rolled up in a rug like the world's most extra burrito. Picture it. Caesar brooding in his temp palace when his crew unrolls a carpet and out pops a young woman who's like, "Yo, I'm Egypt's legit queen. Let's make a deal." It was drama. It was strategy. It was a job interview for baddest woman in the Mediterranean, and Cleopatra crushed it. Sparks flew when Cleopatra and Caesar locked eyes. But let's not get all mushy. This wasn't just a steamy Netflix special. It was two political sharks circling each other, thinking, "Ooh, you're going to be useful." Caesar saw a queen who spoke 9 languages, ran the Mediterranean's cash cow, and had a brain sharp enough to slice through Roman red tape like a hot knife through hummus. Cleo saw Rome's big shot, the guy who could yeet her back onto her throne and keep Egypt from becoming Rome's latest Airbnb acquisition. Sure, there was romance, but it was a power couple vibe with a side of heart eyes. Their fling unfolded in Alexandria's full-on flex mode. They cruised the Nile on a blinged-out barge, gliding past temples older than your grandma's grudges, through fields so lush they could feed half the Mediterranean. The air was all lotus flowers and chill river sounds, and at night they feasted on global delicacies under a starry desert sky with musicians jamming like it was Coachella Ancient Egypt edition. But even in this Insta-worthy paradise, politics crashed the party. Caesar's Roman legions stomped through Alexandria, their boots clanging on marble like a very aggressive rainstick. When Cleo's bratty brother, Ptolemy and his shady advisors caught wind of her Roman BFF, they threw a full-on tantrum and declared war. Cue the Siege of Alexandria, where the world's greatest library turned into a war zone. Imagine dodging arrows while trying to save humanity's brain trust. Talk about multitasking. Some say parts of the library went up in flames with scrolls of priceless knowledge turning to ash while Cleo and Caesar fought like their lives depended on it. Spoiler, they did. They won, though. Ptolemy the XIII either bit the dust in battle or took an unplanned swim in the Nile. Either way, adios. At 21, Cleopatra was Egypt's solo queen, backed by Rome's top general, and now mom, to a kid who was basically a walking diplomatic treaty. Caesarion Mini-Caesar popped out in 47 BCE, a pint-sized power move who could maybe unite Rome and Egypt like a geopolitical PB&J. For 3 years, Cleo was living the dream. She ruled Egypt, had Caesar's muscle, and was raising a kid who might run the Mediterranean show one day. She even visited Rome, setting up in Caesar's swanky villa across the Tiber, throwing intellectual ragers where Rome's brainiacs debated poetry politics and probably pineapple on pizza. But politics is shadier than a desert storm. On the Ides of March 44 BCE, some cranky senators decided Caesar was too extra and turned him into a human pincushion with 23 stab wounds. When word of Caesar's murder hit Cleopatra, it was like a plot twist from a bad soap opera. She was stuck in Rome with her toddler surrounded by the same backstabbers who just iced her sugar daddy. Most folks would have bet she was next on the hit list. But Cleo didn't survive Ptolemaic family feuds by panicking. She rounded up her crew, packed her gold, and sailed back to Egypt faster than you can say y'all are messy. It was back to square one time with a kid to protect and a kingdom to save in a world that just got a whole lot sketchier. That ship ride to Alexandria probably felt like the longest Zoom call in history, with the Egyptian coast taunting her from the horizon. Rome without Caesar was a hot mess, like a reality show with no host, just a bunch of toga-wearing wannabes snarling for the crown. The Civil War split Rome between old-school Republic fans and folks who wanted a single boss. Cleo, chilling in Alexandria, played it like a chess grandmaster, knowing Egypt was rich, but not beefy enough to slug it out with Rome. Her move: pick a winner and pray they'd send a thank you note later. She bet on Mark Antony, and it was a choice that shaped her whole saga. Antony was Caesar's louder, rowdier sequel, Think Caesar, with the volume cranked to 11. Caesar was sneaky. Antony was extra. Caesar wore power like a tailored suit. Antony rocked it like a gold-plated tank top that screamed, "Look at me." Their first meetup was pure Cleopatra theater. She sailed to Tarsus dressed as Venus on a barge with purple sails and silver oars surrounded by perfumed air, and musicians jamming while her squad posed as sea nymphs. Iconic. The vibe was loud and clear. I'm not just a queen, I'm a goddess, and Egypt's the ultimate ally. Antony was shook. Like Caesar, he fell for her brains, her bank account, and her political clout. But unlike Mr. Rome First, Antony started cosplaying as an Egyptian king, trading his toga for Pharaoh chic. Their love story was a Mediterranean road trip that never stopped. They held court in Alexandria, with Antony going full local, and Cleo popping out 3 kids. Their parties were so extra, they made other kings look like they were hosting potlucks. But while they were living their best life, Rome's new golden boy, Octavian Caesar's adopted kid, was playing the responsible Roman card. Every tale of Antony and Cleo's Eastern glow-up made Octavian look like the hometown hero to Romans who thought Antony had ditched his roots for a foreign temptress. Octavian's propaganda game was vicious, spinning Cleo as the evil seductress in a Roman morality play good old Rome versus sneaky East virtue versus vice. The big showdown hit at Actium in 31 BCE, a naval slugfest that'd decide whether Rome or Alexandria would run the Mediterranean. Picture 2 fleets staring each other down, oars slicing through glittering waves, the ancient world's fate on the line. Cleo led her own squadron, her golden ship cutting the water like a boss. But when the battle started going south, she pulled the plug and sailed off with Antony hot on her heels. Was it a panic move? A genius retreat? A plan gone wrong? Historians are still bickering. All we know is their exit tanked their fleet's morale, handing Octavian the W. Back in Alexandria, with Octavian's goons closing in, Cleo faced her final fork in the road: surrender and get dragged through Rome like a defeated Pokemon, or write her own exit. She picked door number 2. On August 30th, 30 BCE, in the palace where she was born, Cleopatra staged her grand finale with the same flair she'd brought to everything: snakebite poison, drink, venom-dipped hairpin. Nobody agrees on the deets, but the outcome was final. The last pharaoh went out like she lived, scripting her own story to the last breath. With her went 3 centuries of Ptolemaic rule and 3,000 years of Egypt going its own way. Octavian found her decked out in royal gear, looking as slay in death as she did in life. Even her haters had to admit girl had style. But Cleo's real win took centuries to shine. Her story wouldn't stay buried. Roman scribes, Shakespeare, Hollywood, they all kept her name alive, making her immortal in a way no pyramid could. She didn't save Egypt's freedom, but she pulled off something harder. She made sure the world would never forget Cleopatra. We're zipping from Alexandria's glitzy monomarble vibes to India in 1930, where the sun's still cranking the heat, but a revolution's cooking with a very different flavor. This place is home to nearly 400 million folks, all under the thumb of a far-off empire, and one tiny bespectacled grandpa with a stick is about to yeet the British Raj into chaos with, wait for it, a pinch of salt. Yes, salt. Move over swords and cannons, this revolution's got seasoning. Mahatma Gandhi didn't exactly scream rebel leader. At 60, he was 100 pounds of pure chill, looking like he'd blow away in a stiff breeze, especially in India's sauna-level heat. His outfit, a DIY white dhoti. He spun himself sandals that were basically fossils, and his dad's old pocket watch. If you saw him shuffling down the street, you'd think, nice old dude probably off to buy lentils. you'd be epically wrong. By 1930, Gandhi was a satyagraha sensei wielding truth force like a moral nuke. This non-violent resistance vibe was so intense, it could make empires sweat. He'd road-tested it in South Africa, figuring out that the best way to stick it to the man was to politely opt out of his nonsense, even if it meant eating a lot of personal grief. Back in India, Gandhi was squaring up against the British Raj, a colonial machine so beefy it made the Death Star look like a startup. For nearly 200 years, the British had been siphoning India's wealth like pro-level vampires, all while claiming it was for India's benefit. Railways check. Courts. Yup, civil service. Sure, but every single one was rigged to scream Britain first, louder than a soccer hooligan. Enter Salt, the humblest of MVPs. Everywhere else, you just stroll to the beach, let the sun do its thing on some seawater, and bam, Salt City. Easy as sneezing. But in British India, nope. The Salt Acts turned salt into a government cash grab. Making, selling, or even having non-British salt was illegal. Every grain was taxed like the British had slapped a price tag on the ocean itself. This salt tax was a gut punch, especially for the poor. A pinch could cost a laborer's daily wage. For a family already scraping by, it was the difference between eating and starving. And in India's sweat-fest climate, salt wasn't optional. It was your body's don't die juice. No salt, no life. Gandhi, the absolute mad lad, picked salt as his battleground because everyone got it. Rich, poor, Hindu, Muslim scholar, or farmer salt was the great equalizer. Everyone needed it, everyone paid the tax, and everyone could see the sheer audacity of banning free ocean goodies. But Gandhi's real flex wasn't just picking the perfect symbol, it was his delivery. He announced he'd walk 240 miles from his Sabarmati ashram to Dandy's coast, where he'd yeet the salt law into oblivion by grabbing a handful of beach salt. At 60. In flip-flops. Through India's Is This the Surface of the Sun Heat? The British bigwigs laughed it off as a stunt. One suit wrote to London, "This is just Gandhi's latest TikTok challenge. Cute, but pointless." Oh, buddy, you just jinxed the whole empire. On March 12, 1930, as dawn mist hugged the Sabarmati River, Gandhi strolled out of his hut like he'd just had the best meditation sesh ever. He'd spent the night praying, and his vibe was so serene it could hush a monsoon. Armed with a bamboo stick, a tiny bag of stuff, and a will of pure steel, he was ready to make history one sandal step at a time. 78 diehards joined him that morning, a ragtag crew of spinners, lawyers, farmers, and students who looked less like a revolution and more like a quirky book club. Their weapons, water bottles, and vibes so strong they could deflect bullets. The march kicked off quiet, just feet on dirt Gandhi's stick, tapping like a metronome, and birds chirping their morning playlist. Nobody guessed these soft steps would go viral. But as word of Gandhi's trek spread, it was like India hit the join button. Villages poured out not just to gawk, but to march. Farmers, kids, grannies, everyone wanted in on the salt party. By week 1, the 78-person squad had ballooned to hundreds. By week 2, thousands were strutting to the sea. It was a full-on resistance rave, a river of white dhotis flowing like the world's chillest flash mob. Every night when they parked for rest, Gandhi gave TED Talks to the crowds. His voice was so soft you had to lean in, but his words hit like a spiritual uppercut. He preached salt, sure, but also dignity, self-reliance, and the audacity to tell an empire, "Nah, we're good." He spoke in Gujarati, keeping it simple enough for kids, but deep enough to make tough guys cry. The British were stuck in a colonial pickle. Arrest Gandhi, martyr city, plus riots. Ignore him. The march was growing like a viral meme. Send in the troops. Beating up peaceful walkers would tank their PR worse than a bad Yelp review. So they did what suits do best, crossed their fingers, and hoped Gandhi would trip over his dhoti and call it quits. The salt march grooved to a beat as steady as Gandhi's creaky pocket watch. Up before the sun, scarfing fruit and nuts like a hipster vegan, a quick prayer sesh. Then it was off for another day of strolling through India's oven-baked countryside. The heat was so brutal it'd make a lizard chug Gatorade, but Gandhi cool as a cucumber, never whining, never pulling the VIP card, just vibing like he was on a casual hike to Narnia. Villages the march rolled through got a full-on glow-up. Local bureaucrats who'd spent years kissing British boots started side-eyeing their loyalty. Cops sent to babysit the marchers couldn't stay grumpy when faced with Gandhi's pure, "I'm just a nice grandpa" energy. The march turned into a pilgrimage, pulling folks from every corner of India. Lawyers ditched their briefcases, students ghosted their textbooks, farmers left their plows, all to join this weird parade led by a stick-wielding senior. They crashed under the stars, munched basic grub, and yapped about freedom like it was a tangible snack you could grab by walking one more mile. Global journalists swarmed like it was Coachella, their stories splashing front pages from London to New York. The world was glued to their screens' newspapers, watching India pull off a revolution at the speed of a chill Sunday stroll. But the real magic wasn't just the headlines, it was the ripple effect in the villages the marchers passed. Locals didn't just clap from the sidelines, they jumped into the rebellion game. Salt was getting cooked illegally all over Gujarat like a statewide DIY seasoning party. Government salt stashes were picketed. Foreign cloth went up in bonfires, sending smoky, screw you vibes into the sky. The British salt monopoly, once solid as a colonial flex, was crumbling faster than a stale samosa, all because a tiny dude with a stick decided to take a really long beach trip. Gandhi himself. Dude was aging backward Benjamin Button style. Pals fretting over his health were shook. He was practically glowing, strutting like a 20-year-old despite the dusty roads. His dhoti stayed mysteriously spotless, his face all zen, even as his march was causing British bigwigs to panic scroll their rulebooks. At night by the campfires, he'd spin cotton on his little wheel, the whirring spindle vibing with the fire's crackle like an ASMR sesh for revolutionaries. Those hands moving with decades of chill were basically threading freedom itself. By week 3, the British finally clocked that this wasn't some flash-in-the-pan stunt. Their spy reports were screaming mini-marches popping off illegal salt labs everywhere, and a nationwide vibe shift where folks were giving the Raj the cold shoulder. The Raj, which loved to brag about its iron grip, was realizing it had zero game against people who just said, "Nah, we're not playing." The march was a media banger, but more crucially, it was rewiring how Indians saw themselves. For ages, the British had peddled the lie that Indians couldn't run their own show. But here was a movement tighter, sharper, and more morally on point than the suits trying to boss them around. Village by village, step by dusty step, the march was flipping the script on colonialism. It screamed Indians could rally, sacrifice, stay cool under pressure. Every peaceful day was a middle finger to the "you're not ready" narrative. And Gandhi, the pint-sized legend at the heart of it, knew exactly what he was doing. When reporters grilled him at night, he'd flash that sneaky grin and say he was just going to grab some beach salt. Like it was no biggie, just another Tuesday. On April 5th, 1930, after 24 days of hoofing it, the crew hit Dandi. The Arabian Sea sparkled like it was showing off waves crashing under a sky so blue it looked like it got photoshopped. Gandhi, true to form, was up pre-dawn for prayers, the sea breeze tossing salt vibes and seabird squawks his way as the horizon lit up. At 6:30 a.m., with thousands of fans and a gaggle of journalists circling like paparazzi, Gandhi shuffled to the shore. The sand was cool waves whispering like they were in on the plan. This 60-year-old, who'd just trekked 240 miles, bent down and scooped a lump of sea salt. He held it up like it was the Oscar for Best Empire Takedown, saying, "With this, I'm shaking the foundations of the British Empire." Mic drop, Gandhi style. It was the tiniest flecks, a handful of salt free from the sea, like it had been since dinosaurs roamed. But Gandhi made the British look like clowns running a circus. The world's mightiest empire ruling a quarter of the globe was tripping over itself because a grandpa grabbed some beach crystals. The salt laws, once a boring admin footnote, were exposed as the pettiest scam in colonial history. Word of Gandhi's stunt spread faster than a spicy meme. Across India, folks started brewing their own salt, flipping the bird to the law. The British were stuck trying to arrest millions for crimes like scooping seawater. Over 60,000 Indians got tossed in jail for salt shenanigans, overflowing prisons, and breaking the Raj's paperwork machine, which was built for a nation that played nice. More than that, the march showed freedom wasn't just a flag or a vote. It was a mindset. Gandhi proved liberty. Lived in people who acted free, no permission needed. The world lost its mind over Gandhi's salt flex. Global newspapers hyped his genius and roasted the British salt hustle. Time magazine crowned him Man of the Year. American civil rights folks took notes like they were cramming for a test. The march didn't just rattle India, it dropped a non-violent playbook for underdogs everywhere. But the real win was for Indians themselves. For the first time in forever, they saw their own strength in action, peaceful and unstoppable. A movement that started with 78 randos grew into an empire-shaking uprising. They learned freedom wasn't something you begged for. You just had to act like it was already yours. The British hung on to India for another 17 years, but the Salt March flipped the game. It showed their power was a house of cards, held up only because Indians let it stand. On that dandy beach, salt in hand, waves crashing, cameras snapping. Gandhi made revolution look as chill and inevitable as the tide. We're bouncing from Dandy's salty beaches to Cambodia's jungle sauna, where trees stretch so high they're basically sky stilts, and the Khmer Empire was cooking up the wildest construction project ever. Like Hold My Rice Wine, we're building a mega city. Angkor sprawled over 400 square miles, housing 1 million folks when London was just a muddy hamlet with big dreams. This place was so extra, it'd make modern urban planners spit out their coffee in awe. But this tale doesn't kick off with fancy temples or flexing kings. It's all about water. Always water, the ultimate drama queen of civilization. The Mekong River snakes through Southeast Asia like a giant's plumbing system, dishing out life juice in a land that flips between, is this a desert dry spells and where's my arc floods, courtesy of the moody monsoon. Most folks would have noped out, maybe set up shop next to a nice predictable volcano. The Khmer, though, they said, water, you're our vibe now. From the 9th century CE, they started building a hydraulic setup, so slick it'd make modern engineers cry into their calculators. We're not talking a couple of cute ditches, think canals, reservoirs, and dikes that snatched monsoon floods, stashed them for the dry season, and doled out water like a boss barista pouring the perfect latte. The star of the show, the Beret giant fake lakes that could hold billions of gallons. The Western Beret was 5 miles long, 1 mile wide, bigger than some real lakes. Standing by it in the dry season, staring at that endless water under a sky so blue it felt like a personal attack, you'd swear you were chilling by an inland ocean. These weren't just big puddles. They fueled a farming revolution so epic, the region wouldn't see that kind of population boom again until folks started rocking smartphones. The Khmer could churn out 3 rice crops a year, rain or no rain, like they'd hacked the weather app. Modern farmers with their fancy tractors probably jealous. Rice is the goat of food, cheap filling stores like a champ, and plays nice with any sauce. When you're swimming in millions of tons of it, you're not just feeding farmers, you're bankrolling artists, engineers, priests, soldiers, and architects. You're funding an empire. Enter Jayavarman VII, who snagged the Khmer throne in 1181 CE and decided to go full bigger is better mode making Egypt's pyramids look like a DIY birdhouse. This guy wasn't here to be a chill king. He wanted his name in history's group chat for a millennium. Spoiler, mission accomplished. Under his watch, Angkor blew up into the biggest pre-industrial city ever, sprawling, wider than modern LA with roads so straight, Roman engineers would have sent fan mail. But the temples, those were the Khmer's. We're kind of a big deal. Billboards, Angkor Wat. The main event wasn't just a temple, it was theology and 3D engineering with swagger ambition carved in stone. Its central tower shot 213 feet into the jungle sky, screaming, "You can't miss us," from miles away. The whole setup mimicked Mount Meru, the Hindu universe's VIP peak, where gods kicked it with the tower as the divine penthouse. Here's the kicker. Angkor wasn't built on slave labor. The Khmer were so loaded and organized they paid their workers, and the vibes suggest temple building was less a job and more a holy side hustle. Imagine clocking in each day knowing you're crafting paradise, one chiseled stone at a time. Talk about job satisfaction. The detail work was next level extra. Every wall was a canvas of carvings, Hindu myths, historical flexes, or just nature looking pretty. Apsaras, those celestial dance queens, floated across the stone in endless conga lines, their chill faces and poses so graceful they'd make a ballet star quit in shame. The central chambers had acoustics that carried a whisper, like it was mic'd up, and the galleries were laid out for natural AC, keeping things cool, even when the sun was roasting everything outside. Angkor Wat hit all the senses smooth stone under your fingers, light and shadow playing tag through clever gaps, your footsteps echoing, like you were both a nobody and a god. Walking through it back then with incense wafting from shrines, priests chanting, and jungle birds squawking must have felt like stumbling into a divine PowerPoint presentation on human dream synergy. But Jayavarman wasn't done flexing. Angkor Wat was just the appetizer. He dropped Angkor Thom, a walled city, for the royal crew and government suits. At its heart, the Bayon Temple was his mind-bending masterpiece, decked with over 200 massive stone faces, probably of Jayavarman himself, all rocking a smug, whomey grin that'd give the Mona Lisa a run for her money. Picture rolling into Angkor Thom as a foreign VIP. You'd pass gates with giant demons and angels playing tug-of-war with massive stone snakes, like the world's most intense lawn decor. Inside every corner hit you with another jaw-dropping temple, another bet you can't top this, flex screaming that the Khmer had cracked the code on making stone do backflips. The Khmer weren't just slapping together some cool buildings for the gram, they were crafting eternal flexes. They picked sandstone that got tougher with age, like a fine wine, or your grandma's grudges, and used building tricks that laughed off earthquakes, floods, and the jungle's relentless "I'm gonna grow everywhere" attitude. These weren't tourist traps for a quick century. They were bet will outlast your whole empire vibes, and for ages it was a total win. Angkor was the pulsing core of an empire stretching from the South China Sea to the Bay of Bengal, like the coolest kid on the block with the biggest backyard. Trade routes rolled in like group chat notifications, hauling Chinese silk Indian spices, Burmese gems, and Filipino gold. Angkor's markets were a chaotic Coachella of commerce languages clashing cardamom and cinnamon vibes in the air, merchants haggling like it was a sport, and goods that had backpacked thousands of miles to party in this jungle hotspot. But here's the tea: success can be a sneaky trap. The more Angkor slayed, the hungrier it got. More temples needed more workers needed more rice needed fancier waterworks, and fancier waterworks needed a bureaucracy so extra it probably had its own bureaucracy. By the 13th century, the empire was sprinting on the edge of an environmental cliff. That epic hydraulic system. It was Angkor's superpower and its kryptonite. Natural climate wobbles, think OG climate change. Not the car exhaust kind, started messing with the monsoons. Some years it was billed an arc. Floods drowning the canals. Others, it was where's the water droughts leaving the berets as cracked mud pies under a sun that didn't quit. The Khmer had built a civilization so dialed into its environment, it was like a Tesla on autopilot, pure magic when it worked, but one glitch and you're toast. By the late 14th century, the water system was throwing tantrums. Canals were clogging faster than a bad TikTok algorithm. Reservoirs were either overflowing like a kid's pool party or bone dry like a bad Tinder date. The rice surpluses that fed 1 million people and bankrolled Temple Palooza were fading into remember when we had food territory. Then there were the nosy neighbors. The Thai to the west and Vietnamese to the east were eyeing Angkor's bling like it was Black Friday. As the Khmer got wobbly, the pressure cranked up. Thai armies started popping in, not always to conquer, just to remind everyone, hey, you're not that untouchable anymore. The knockout punch landed in 1431 when a Thai crew rolled up besieged Angkor and made the Khmer court pack their bags. But honestly, the party was already fizzling. People had been ghosting the city for years, moving to spots that were easier to defend, feed, and manage. Angkor's exit wasn't a blockbuster explosion, no fireballs, no zombie hordes, just a slow fade like a Polaroid left in the sun. Government offices emptied out like a Zoom meeting nobody wanted to join. Temples went quiet as priests pieced out to cozier gigs. The hydraulic system, without its army of maintenance nerds, started breaking down like a cheap phone charger. Then the jungle said, "My turn. In Cambodia's tropical sauna plants don't grow, they invade. Vines thicker than your uncle's biceps started climbing the temples. Tree roots, patient as a cat waiting for you to open a tuna can, wormed into every crack and pried stones apart like they were Lego. Birds dropped seeds in the carvings, sprouting trees that dug roots deep into buildings that once hosted royal brunches. Monsoon rains poured through busted roofs, turning prayer halls into waterfalls. For centuries, Angkor snoozed under a green blanket. Local villagers knew the temples were there, but they were just those old rocks in the woods, like finding a weird rock on a hike, cool, but whatever. Every now and then some wanderer would trip over a mossy carving or a vine-choked tower, but it was like spotting a seashell, neat, not life-changing. It wasn't until the 19th century, when French explorers started poking around, that the world went, "Wait, what?" In 1860, Henri Mouhot stumbled on Angkor Wat and lost his mind, scribbling that it was Solomon's Temple meets Michelangelo's fever dream. But even he didn't grasp the full flex. Modern tech like satellites and radar has spilled the tea. Angkor wasn't just temples. It was a full-on urban sprawl with neighborhoods, workshops, markets, and a canal road grid that screamed, "We invented city planning." The Khmer didn't just build a town, they crafted a civilization that vibed so hard with its environment it supported 1 million people without wrecking the place, at least until Mother Nature changed the rules. Now, as restorers peel back the jungle like it's a bad haircut, Angkor's spilling its secrets. The temples emerge like glow-up butterflies, their carvings so crisp you can see every fold in an apsara's skirt, every smirk on a demon's face, every petal on flowers, carved by artists who've been dust for 700 years. The real jaw-dropper the Khmer's eco-game was Chef's Kiss. Their hydraulic system wasn't just cool, it kept a megacity humming sustainably for 500 years with more people than the region holds now. Angkor's rise and fall is a spicy history lesson for our climate chaos era. The Khmer showed you can build epic civilizations by high-fiving nature, not punching it. But they also proved that even the slickest setup can't always hack shifts beyond your control. Wandering Angkor's restored temples today, with tropical light dancing on ancient stones and the modern world buzzing faintly like a bad Wi-Fi signal, you can still feel the Khmer's ghosted empire. The stones hold memories of prayers, parties, and quiet moments when a civilization that owned its world learned even the best plans are temporary. The beauty's still there, though, whispering that humans with enough grit and smarts can build wonders that outlast the empires that dreamed them up. We're yeeting ourselves from Cambodia's sweaty jungle hug to Antarctica, where the air's so crisp it's basically a glass chime. The silence is loud enough to hear your pulse, and 2 squads of dudes were about to dive into the most polite insanity ever. A race to the South Pole, a spot so brutal it makes Mars look like a beach resort. In 1911, Antarctica was Earth's last whoops. We forgot to map this zone weirder than an alien planet. More folks have crashed in space than have wintered there. The wind doesn't just whistle, and it howls like it's auditioning for a horror flick flattening grown men. The cold. It's not a nip, it's a full-on assault. Flash freezing your skin faster than you can say "bad idea," and turning your breath into tinkling ice confetti. Into this frozen nightmare, 2 teams rolled up in the 1911-1912 summer, fueled by science nerdery, flag-waving pride, and that unhinged human urge to make life harder for no reason. Leading the Brits was Robert Falcon Scott, a Royal Navy guy who treated polar treks like he was planning a fussy tea party. Scott was all about proper suffering, think British stiff upper lip vibes where efficiency was for quitters. His crew was going to man-haul their sledges, aka strap themselves to supply-loaded sleds and drag them like Oxford-educated mules. Not because they were broke, they had dogs, but because Scott thought sweating it out was more gentlemanly, like choosing a typewriter over a laptop to build character. Their Cape Evans base was peak Edwardian OCD. Everything was in its place. Science gear lined up like it was ready for inspection, pics of wives and crushes pinned with military precision. The hut reeked of pipe smoke, seal oil, and that funky, we're all stuck together, but pretending we're fine, smell like a dorm room with extra repression. Meanwhile, a few hundred miles off, Roald Amundsen's Norwegian squad was playing a different game. Amundsen had crashed with the Inuit soaking up their how to not die in the cold hacks. While Scott saw Antarctica as a British grit test, Amundsen saw a puzzle to solve with max efficiency, no ego trips. His team leaned hard on 97 sled dogs bred and trained like furry Olympians. While the Brits debated if motorized sleds were cheating spoiler, they broke. Anyway, the Norwegians turned dog sledding into an art form, their expedition a lean mean. Get to the pole and don't die machine. Their Framheim base was dug into the ice shelf, a cozy maze of tunnels and rooms that stayed toasty through Antarctica's "you'll never feel warm again" winters. It smelled like stew dog hair and dudes who'd cracked the code on chilling in Earth's worst Airbnb. The Brits kept formal dinner vibes and dress codes. The Norwegians were all about scarfing calories, staying warm, and treating survival like a DIY project, not a morality play. The race kicked off on October 19th, 1911, with both crews launching their 900-mile pole quests. Scott's posse was 16 guys, some janky motorized sleds, ponies, dogs, and enough science gear to open a nerd museum. Amundsen 5 dudes, 4 sleds, 52 elite dogs traveling light and fast like they had a hot date at the pole. The early trek was across a mind-bending void. The Ross ice shelf was a white infinity pool so flat and featureless it gaslit your brain. Temperature tricks made stuff look like it was floating. The horizon ghosted you, blending ice and sky into a surreal smoothie. Distance was a myth. No trees, no buildings, just endless white messing with your head. You could hear the grind sledge runners hissing, dogs panting, boots crunching, and the occasional bloody hell when a ski snapped or a sled hit a sneaky bump. At night, the silence was thicker than fog, broken only by ice creaking or wind whispering like it was plotting something. Scott's crew hit drama right out the gate. Their fancy motorized sleds, about as useful as a paper towel in a blizzard, conking out in days. The Siberian ponies picked because someone Googled animals plus cold. Eels good were a hot mess. They sweated buckets, then froze solid when they stopped their hooves punching through the ice like bad dancers. Every step was a workout from hell. Mornings meant breaking camp in temps that made Siberian winters feel like a spa day. Every task tying knots, fixing gear, was like doing brain surgery in oven mitts. Breath froze into face icicles, building frost masks that needed regular chipping to avoid frostbite. Scott's lads grumbled about the cold, the gear, the food, each other, but with that British whinge, but keep going energy, they dragged their sleds through a landscape that screamed humans not welcome. Amundsen's team, meanwhile, was cruising like they'd hacked the Antarctic mainframe. Their dogs were polar MVPs, double coats keeping them snug, wide paws gliding over snow like furry snowboards. They trotted for hours, puffing steamy breath, hauling sleds with the glee of pups chasing a tennis ball. The Norwegians moved with chill precision, making Scott's slog look like a bad group project. The Norwegians were basically the Bear Grylls of polar camping, setting up their tent, feeding the pups, and whipping up hot grub each night like it was a Michelin-starred choreography. Their gear was stress-tested to death tweaked and tested again until it was as reliable as a Swiss watch. Their clothes, a layering masterpiece, you could tweak for any weather without accidentally turning into a popsicle. But Amundsen's real flex was getting that Antarctica didn't give a frozen fig about your passport grit or good vibes. It'd yeet you into oblivion with the same cold shoulder efficiency, whether you were a Brit with a stiff upper lip or a Norwegian with a sensible plan. Tools and know-how were the only VIP passes here. As both crews pushed deeper into Antarctica's icy guts, the scenery got a glow-up. The Ross ice shelf's flat white void gave way to the trans-Antarctic mountains, jagged peaks poking through the ice like a dragon's spine. Both teams had to tackle the Beardmore Glacier, a frozen river of good luck, not dying riddled with crevasses that demanded ninja-level navigation and eyes in the back of your head. The glacier was where the pain train pulled in. At nearly 10,000 feet, breathing felt like sucking air through a straw. The sun bounced off the ice like a laser pointer, frying skin and causing snow blindness that could leave you stumbling like a drunk penguin toward a fatal whoopsie. Temps swung from "I'm melting in the sun" to "I'm a human icicle in the shade." Scott's ponies finally threw in the towel here, leaving the lads to drag mega-heavy sleds up endless ice hills. They switched to a relay system, haul one sledge forward, trudge back for another covering each mile 3 times. It was soul-crushing, body-breaking, and peak British, this'll look epic in the history books nonsense. Amundsen's dogs, meanwhile, treated the glacier like a fun new playground. They bounded up slopes with the energy of caffeinated toddlers, leaving their humans half thankful, half jealous. The Norwegians' light sleds and pro-grade gear kept them zooming, gobbling miles like it was a casual Sunday drive, while the Brits wrestled with loads that felt like hauling a piano uphill. On the polar plateau, Antarctica showed its true colors, a white hellscape at 10,000 feet, with temps dipping below on 40 degrees and winds that'd steal your body heat faster than a bad Tinder date. Sastrugi, those wind-carved ice ridges turned sledge travel into a WWE match against terrain that wanted to snap your gear and your spirit. The surface flipped between buttery smooth and surprise. Here's a rock-hard obstacle course. The air was so thin, even gym bros were gasping after tying their boots. Scott's team, now down to 5 for the final pole push, was falling apart like a cheap tent. Edgar Evans, the group's beefiest dude, was battling frostbite and exhaustion. Lawrence Oates was nursing an old war wound that the cold was turning into a full-on vendetta. Scott himself was running on stubbornness and caffeine fumes, scribbling in his diary, by candlelight his entries ping-ponging between "here's some science" and "we're so screwed." The cold wasn't just annoying, it was a straight-up villain. Their British-designed clothes were as useful as a paper towel in a storm. Their food, calculated for a best-case trek, wasn't cutting it for the calorie inferno of polar life. Worst of all, their fuel was pulling a Houdini, leaking or evaporating from cans, leaving them short on heat and cooking juice. Mornings meant dragging themselves out of sleeping bags with all the enthusiasm of a Monday alarm. Setting up camp took forever as frost-numbed fingers fumbled with icy zippers and tent poles. Eating. Asaga food froze solid before it hit their mouths, needing precious fuel to thaw into something that wouldn't crack a molar. On December 14, 1911, Amundsen's crew hit the South Pole with the vibe of a team checking off a grocery list. No big "we made it" drama. Just 5 guys and their dogs pulling up to a spot their gadget said was the Earth's southernmost dot. It looked like the same white nothing they'd been crossing for weeks. Amundsen planted Norway's flag like he was staking out a really bad Airbnb, snapped some pics for the gram or history, and started plotting the trip home. They'd crushed 1,800 miles in 99 days, hitting their ETA like they'd scheduled it with Google Calendar. 3 weeks later, on January 17, 1912, Scott's beat-up squad staggered to the same spot, only to find a Norwegian tent and a "GG, you made it" note from Amundsen. The Brits had lost, but in true British fashion, they were about to turn oops into epic legend status. The way back was where Antarctica cashed its "you thought this was hard check." Scott's crew, already wrecked from the pole slog, faced another 900 miles with low supplies, busted gear, and the soul-crushing L of defeat. Edgar Evans went first, wiping out after a fall and never waking up. The remaining 4 kept hauling battling terrain that seemed to level up its evil daily. Lawrence Oates, with frostbite turning his feet into frozen nightmares, couldn't keep up. Mornings became torture porn as he shoved mangled feet into frozen boots, his groans echoing through the tent. Finally, during a blizzard that screamed, "Stay inside," Oates made his move. "I'm just popping out," he said. All casual might be a bit. Then he yeeted himself into the storm, a selfless, "You guys got this" move to give his buds a shot without dragging a human anchor. Scott, Dr. Edward Wilson, and Edgar Bowers made it within 11 miles of their next supply stash before a monster blizzard trapped them in their tent. Fuel ran dry, food vanished, and one by one they checked out, done in by cold exhaustion and Antarctica's humans. Nah attitude. Scott's final diary entries, scratched out as he froze in his sleeping bag with the wind screaming outside, turned their flop into a weird kind of win. Found months later by a search crew, his words, part science, log, part cry for help, hit like a gut punch. These rough notes and our dead bodies must tell the tale, he wrote, crafting a saga of grit versus nature's lull. Try again, that'd echo for ages. Amundsen's team, meanwhile, waltzed back to base, dogs chubby and happy gear. A-OK mission nailed with the kind of, we got this energy that's great for survival, but meh for drama. They showed Antarctica could be tamed with prep tech and realistic vibes. But Scott's epic fail stole the spotlight over Amundsen's clean W. Humans, it turns out, are suckers for a glorious train wreck over a tidy victory. By choosing to go out like tragic heroes, Scott's crew spun a legend that no amount of Norwegian efficiency could touch. We're zooming from Antarctica's icy snooze fest to Mexico's steamy heart, where the impossible was just Tuesday's to-do list. Nestled among mountains that high-fived the clouds, Lake Texcoco was the stage for a city so wild it made Spanish conquistadors guys who'd seen Europe's fanciest spots gape like they'd just witnessed a unicorn doing backflips. Tenochtitlan wasn't just near the water, it was the water built on it, with it like the lake was its BFF. While others saw a soggy problem, the Aztecs saw a canvas for the America's slickest metropolis, laughing at Venice like cute canals. But we're next level. This epic starts with a real estate nightmare. The Aztecs or Mexica rolled into the Valley of Mexico late to the party, like showing up to a potluck when all the good dishes are gone. The prime valley land was locked down by city-states who weren't sharing. All that was left, some swampy islands in Lake Texcoco that screamed uninhabitable to anyone with a shred of sense. Normal folks would have kept house hunting. The Aztecs, they saw those marshy patches and went jackpot. Floating real estate baby Lake Texcoco was a moody diva shape-shifting with the seasons. Wet season. A fish and duck buffet, freshwater paradise. Dry season. A salty grump, but doable if you knew its vibe. Shallow enough to wade through miles of mudflats, deep enough for serious canoe traffic, it was a lake with options. And it was a total looker. The water mirrored snow-capped volcanoes like a giant Instagram filter, glowing at dawn with pinks, golds, and silvers that didn't even have names. Bird flocks exploded from the reeds, darkening the sky with wings that sounded like a stadium cheer. But as any realtor will tell you, a pretty view doesn't solve the "where do we park the houses" problem. Enter the Chinampas, the Aztecs. Answer artificial islands made of mud-rotting plants and pure. We got this energy. These weren't just dirt piles. They were agricultural glow-ups that turned lake sludge into farmland, so fertile it'd make modern farmers cry into their kale smoothies. Imagine the build workers hip deep in water, weaving reed baskets and stuffing them with lake-bottom goo. Layer on layer of composted plant sediment, and yes, recycled poop, stacked into neat rectangles, just above the waterline. Willow trees planted on the edges rooted down like nature's rebar, locking it all in place. and telling erosion to take a hike. The result? A hydroponic flex that grew crops in soil juiced up by lake nutrients. Water was never an issue. Roots just sipped from the lake like it was an all-you-can-drink buffet. The lake's microclimate kept things chill, shielding plants from frost or heat waves. Productivity. Off the charts. One chinampa could feed a family and churn out extra for market corn beans, squash tomatoes, chilies, even flowers, all growing like they were auditioning for a gardening show. But chinampas were just the appetizer. The Aztecs linked their floating farms with canals, turning the lake into a watery highway system. Picture a city where every street is a canal, canoes gliding with goods, like it's Venice with better Wi-Fi. These canals were multitasking legends. They hosted fish farms with species born for lake life. They were trade routes for cacao obsidian and fancy feathers from far-off jungles. They doubled as moats with drawbridges, making Tenochtitlan a try invading us, we dare you fortress. And get this, they were a waste management hack. Human poop was boated out to fertilize the chinampas, closing the loop, so nothing was wasted, and the city's farms stayed swole. It was urban planning that hugged the ecosystem, treating the city like nature's bestie, not its boss. By the early 1500s, Tenochtitlan was a beast housing 200,000 to 300,000 people, bigger than any European city, flexing at the time. Its core sat on an island linked to the mainland by causeways you could cut off in a war, turning it into a floating Fort Knox. But the real flex was how it blurred the line between city and farm. From the Central Pyramid, you'd gawk at a geography-defying vista neighborhoods rising from the water, on platforms built over generations, gardens floating like green bling in silver canals, canoes zipping through like the city's bloodstream. The air was a wild mix, lake water, blooming plants, sizzling street food, copal incense, rich soil, and clean H2O vibes. The soundtrack paddles, splashing ducks, quacking nahuatl chatter, bouncing across canals, and distant temple drums vibing like a pre-Columbian Coachella. When Spanish conquistadors first clocked Tenochtitlan, their brains short-circuited. Bernal Diaz del Castillo, one of Cortez's crew, scribbled that they wondered if they'd tripped into a fantasy novel like the medieval bestseller Amadis of Gaul had come to life. These guys had seen Seville, Rome, Constantinople, but a city floating on a lake feeding itself from magic gardens. That was next-level wizardry, leaving them slack-jawed like they'd just seen a dragon do a TED Talk. The Tlatelolco market linked to Tenochtitlan by a causeway blew the Spanish conquistadors' minds harder than the city's temples or palaces. This wasn't just a swap meet, it was a Mesoamerican megamall handling more daily deals than most European cities saw in a month. Cortez himself snitched to the Spanish king that it was double the size of Salamanca's main square and ran smoother than Spain's best markets, like the Aztecs had invented logistics before logistics was cool. Fresh lake fish flopped next to dried ocean catches hauled from hundreds of miles away. Chinampa veggies sat pretty beside tropical fruits, carried by traders who probably deserved medals for the trek. Gold and silver bling showed off Aztec craftsmanship that made European jewelers look like amateurs, while textiles flaunted weaving so tight it'd give a loom a nervous breakdown. But the real jaw-dropper for the Spanish, the vibes. This wasn't a chaotic flea market, it was a well-oiled machine run by folks who could teach a masterclass in urban hustle. The orderliness screamed, "We've got this," in a way that'd make modern city planners high-five in awe. The Chinampa system feeding this urban beast was straight-up genius. These weren't just floating veggie patches, they were food factories that cranked out crops while keeping the soil swole forever. Crop rotation kept the dirt happy year after year, like a spa day for farmland. Companion planting was like matchmaking for plants, pairing buddies that shooed pests and boosted growth. Water management was so precise, it was like the lake was on a drip IV delivering H2O exactly where and when the crops needed it. The Aztecs were also seed selection wizards, breeding corn beans and squash so perfectly tuned for chinampas, they might as well have had "Made in Texcoco" stamped on them. Their farming calendar was synced with religious fiestas, turning planting and harvesting into block parties that got the whole crew hyped while checking off the to-do list. Even now, in Xochimilco, Mexico City's Chinampa holdout farmers still grow flowers and veggies with OG Aztec tricks. Tourists can cruise the canals in boats, gawking at gardens that were flexing when Cortés was still learning to tie his shoes. But Chinampas weren't just about growing snacks, they were a whole new way of vibing with nature. European cities back then were like nature. Let's fight it, battling floods and droughts like they were personal enemies. Tenochtitlan. It danced with the lake's rhythms. Annual floods that'd wreck a normal city were funneled through canals to give the Chinampas a nutrient glow-up, like a green smoothie for the fields. The lake's ecosystem dished out protein fish ducks, even algae cakes that were basically ancient superfood bars. The Aztecs built a city that didn't just survive its environment, it made it better. Poop became Chinampa, fertilizer. Canals were fish and bird condos. Floating gardens amped up biodiversity like the lake was throwing a wildlife rave. It was urban planning as ecoboss supporting not just the America's biggest city, but one of the world's heavyweight champs. This eco-utopia got yeeted into oblivion fast. When Cortés and his crew crashed the party in 1519, they brought smallpox, typhus, and other old-world cooties that ripped through the Aztecs like a bad TikTok trend. Diseases killed way more folks than Spanish swords, tanking the social glue that kept the Chinampas and city humming. The 1521 siege of Tenochtitlan was an environmental faceplant as much as a military L. The Spanish trashed the causeways and filled the canals, trying to force the city into a Euro-style mold, like swapping a Ferrari for a clunky sedan. They drained most of the lake, turning Chinampas into regular farmland that was about as productive as a broken vending machine. In a few generations, one of history's slickest urban setups was downgraded to a basic colonial town built on the ashes of something way cooler. The Spanish bagged an empire, but obliterated tech that Europe wouldn't touch for centuries. Today, Mexico City squats on Tenochtitlan's ruins, still wrestling with flooding and water drama the Aztecs had on lock 500 years ago. The lake's mostly gone paved over like a bad memory, with just a few canal scraps hinting at the aquatic wonderland it was. But the legend lives on in Xochimilco's Chinampas, and the archaeological receipts of what humans can pull off when they team up with nature. The Aztecs' floating gardens are history's ultimate sustainability sleigh proof that the dopest tech often looks like straight-up magic. We're zipping from Tenochtitlan's watery wonderland to the Silk Road, where history's ballsiest sales reps saw the mega gap between Europe and Asia and thought, perfect, it's the world's longest flea market. These weren't your local Etsy hustlers, they were global deal-makers who'd spend 2 years schlepping Chinese silk to Roman divas or hauling gems from Ceylon to Persian VIPs like it was just another Tuesday. Marco Polo's the poster boy in the history books, but he was just one dude in a millennium-long conga line of traders who'd been at it way before he showed up. The Silk Road wasn't one tidy path. It was a chaotic ancient highway grid with multiple routes, pit stops, and the odd bandit ambush to keep your heart rate up. Picture planning a biz trip through lands that don't even have names yet, across deserts where a bad turn means you're toast over mountains, where breathing feels like a part-time job, all to hawk luxury swag to folks speaking gibberish, and rocking customs that seem designed to troll outsiders. Modern execs cry over a delayed red eye. Silk Road merchants budgeted for holdups lasting seasons. The adventure kicked off in China's trade hubs, Xi'an, Kashgar, Dunhuang, where merchants spent months assembling caravans like they were prepping for an intergalactic road trip. This wasn't tossing a laptop in a carry-on. A legit Silk Road crew needed hundreds of camels, a posse of armed guards, interpreters who could flex 5 languages desert whisperer guides who knew every hidden waterhole, and enough supplies to keep the whole circus fed for months. The camels bioengineered MVPs for long-haul gigs. Bactrian camels rocking shaggy coats and double humps could lug 300 pounds of gear across terrain that'd laugh at a jeep. They could go days without a sip munch on scrub, even goats would snub, and keep their chill, swaying stride through sandstorms that'd blind a human. Best of all, they had the vibe of a grumpy uncle who's seen it all and is vaguely unimpressed. Perfect for a trek where patience was your lifeline. A caravan's departure was a global trade jam session, lead camels' bells clanging like a medieval mixtape. Leather harnesses, creaking wooden saddles, groaning merchants and guards yapping in a dozen tongues about the day's plan, all layered over the soft shuff-shuff of camel hooves on dirt. First up, the Taklamakan Desert, whose name basically screams check in, but don't check out a tourism tagline that'd make you rethink your LinkedIn bio. This wasn't just a dry patch, it was a dune ocean that could swallow cities whole, with daytime temps that'd grill a kebab and nights cold enough to freeze your regrets. Landmarks. Mostly the bleached bones of traders who flunked Navigation 101. Crossing it was like planning a Mars mission. Water spots were mapped with pirate treasure precision, miss a well by a mile, and you're a desert Yelp review waiting to happen. Merchants moved at night when they could, steering by stars that had been guiding traders since forever. The cool dark, a sweet break from the suns you will burn. Attitude. Sandstorms, the caravan would hunker down, camels circled like a furry fortress, humans wrapped in silk scarves. Yep, using your high-end merch as a dust shield, because irony's a great travel buddy. Storms could rage for days, sand so fine it snuck into everything, leaving you tasting grit and feeling like you were slowly turning into a sandcastle. But on clear days, the desert was a stunner, dunes shifting from gold at dawn to amber at dusk, stretching to a horizon that screamed, "You're not in Kansas anymore." At night, with zero light pollution, the stars were so bright, it felt like the sky was flexing its bling, a cosmic GPS for guides who read it like a comic book. Oasis towns along the route, Dunhuang, Turpan, Samarkand, were like VIP lounges in the sandy void mini-miracles of water and greenery. These weren't just gas stations. They were global swap meets where East met West in a chaotic, profitable party. The air was thick with spice vibes, cinnamon from Ceylon, cardamom from India, Persian saffron, pricier than a penthouse. The sound, a linguistic food fight with merchants from a dozen cultures haggling swapping exchange rates and dishing dirt on the road ahead. Chinese silk traders unfurled their goods like they were revealing the shroud of Turin, the fabric so fine it glowed like bottled sunlight. Persian rug dealers rolled out their masterpieces with magician-level flair each carpet, a woolen epic of hunts, gardens, or patterns that'd make a math nerd swoon. Indian gem traders showed off stones that looked like they'd trapped bits of ocean, or sky, Myanmar emeralds, Ceylon sapphires, Arabian Gulf pearls with their own built-in spotlight. Roman merchants, when they made the full trek, brought glassware so fragile it was a miracle it survived, plus gold coins screaming, "We're Rome, baby." But the Silk Road wasn't just a luxury goods pipeline. It was the ancient world's Wi-Fi, beaming ideas, tech, and culture at camel speed. Buddhist monks schlepped their faith from India to China, setting up monasteries that doubled as motels, libraries, and nerd hubs. Islamic scholars translated Greek brain teasers and Indian math, laying the groundwork for the science glow-up centuries later. The Silk Road wasn't just a fancy goods shuttle, it was a world-changing tech pipeline, and the merchants were too busy counting coins to notice they were rewriting history. Paper-making tricks hopped from China to the Islamic world, then Europe, turning scribbled notes into a communication revolution. Gunpowder sneaked along the same routes, making wars go boom in a whole new way. Magnetic compasses, printing hacks, and metalworking wizardry hitched rides with traders who cared more about their profit margins than accidentally kickstarting the Renaissance. Medical know-how tagged along with the merch. Chinese acupuncture nerds swapped tips with Persian pill pushers and Indian scalpel pros, creating a global health mashup that saved lives left and right. Spices weren't just food bling, they were medieval WebMD doubling as cures in a world where eat this and heal this were basically the same job. If the Taklamakan Desert was a tough gig, the Pamir Mountains, aka the roof of the world, made it look like a beach day. Caravans had to climb so high the air was basically on strike, leaving humans and camels gasping like they'd run a marathon. The cold was a skin-freezing ninja, and surprise blizzards could trap you in. Hope your snacks last survival mode, praying the storm would chill out before you did. But life's a hustler even up there. Tibetans, Kyrgyz, and other locals had cracked the high-altitude code with the same swagger desert folk used to tame sand. They hooked caravans up with guides, pack animals, and supplies, running their own side hustle based on knowing every rock and snowflake like it was their BFF. The passes were decked out with prayer flags, stone piles, and trinkets from past traders, an international vibe of "please don't let me die" that screamed humans begging for a cosmic save. The wind up there, it sounded like the mountains were breathing, reminding you this was their turf and you were just visiting. The Silk Road's real MVP wasn't the swag, it was the trust game that kept the whole show running without PayPal ATMs or Zoom calls. Merchants cooked up financial hacks early, checks, business prenups, and insurance vibes that let pricey goods bounce across continents without getting jacked. The Hawala system, still kicking in some spots today, was like Venmo, but with vibes no cash moved, just trusted middlemen settling tabs based on rep and family ties. A Venetian trader could scribble a coded note to a buddy in Constantinople who'd front cash for a Samarkand deal, all on a handshake and generational street cred. These weren't just money moves, they were diplomatic and cultural glue. Merchants moonlighted as low-key envoys, passing royal memos, brokering safe travel deals, and spilling tea on far-off lands for rulers plotting their next move. They were the LinkedIn of the ancient world networking piece along with profit. The Silk Road didn't crash and burn, it just faded as sea routes started stealing the show. When Vasco da Gama sailed around the Cape of Good Hope and Columbus bumbled into the Americas chasing Asia, ocean trade got faster, cheaper, and less oh-no bandits than camel treks. The Ottoman Empire's rise threw more shade, slapping new taxes and borders on land routes, making them a pricey hassle. Central Asia's trade hubs, once the hottest spots in global commerce, turned into sleepy towns like former it girls, reminiscing about their glory days. But the real tea, the world got too big for the Silk Road's cozy setup. Back when the known world was a small club, a few dusty trails could handle the trade game. As explorers cracked open new continents and ships linked far-off shores, the land routes lost their monopoly to a messier, globalized economy. Now, as we track Amazon packages zipping overnight from halfway across the planet, hop on FaceTime with folks in different time zones, and take instant global Wi-Fi for granted, let's give a nod to those camel-riding OGs. They spent years dodging death to lug silk and spices across insane distances, proving humans will always go bonkers for cool stuff from faraway places. These merchants were globalization's first influencers, stitching the world together one epic deal at a time. We're swapping the Silk Road's dusty deal-making for 9th century Baghdad, where the Tigris River sparkled, palm trees swayed like they were in a music video, and the call to prayer bounced off domed roofs. Here, the world's brainiest folks were throwing the ultimate nerd party at the House of Wisdom, Beit al-Hikmah, a mega-hub that was part library, part think tank, part global uni, and part translation HQ. It was like a TED Talk convention where everyone's goal was to crack the universe's code. The building itself was a total brain flex, cool halls with floor-to-ceiling shelves stuffed with manuscripts in languages that'd make Duolingo cry. Reading rooms bathed in sunlight through ninja-level window placement, lighting up texts older than your great-grandma's grudges. The air, a mix of ink parchment fancy, rosewater spritzed on VIP scrolls, and coffee that game-changing juice, keeping scholars up for midnight geek-outs. This saga kicks off with Caliph Harun al-Rashid, the guy from 1001 Nights, who was too busy building the world's dopest library to mess with genies or flying rugs. Harun got that knowledge as the ultimate flex, like a resource that keeps on giving while empires crash. But his son, Caliph al-Mamun, turned the House of Wisdom into a full-on intellectual thunderdome. This dude was so obsessed with learning he'd make modern college deans faint. He didn't just hoard books, He bankrolled translations, funded wild research, and created a vibe where scholars from all walks could collab without sweating cultural or religious shade. Al-Mamun's translation hustle was like the ancient world's version of, let's put everything on the cloud. Instead of digitizing, they were turning Greek philosophy, Indian math, Persian star charts, and Mesopotamian medical hacks into Arabic, a universal nerd language that let ideas hop borders like they had VIP passes. Picture illiterate scholars hunched over crusty Greek scrolls under flickering oil lamps, arguing over Aristotle's one word, while their buddies wrestled with Indian algebra or Persian navigation guides. The soundtrack pens, scratching pages flipping, and the occasional eureka when someone cracked a juicy text. Translation wasn't just a job, it was an art form that'd make modern linguists sweat. Greek philosophy wasn't just in a foreign tongue. It came from a brain space so alien you needed a PhD in what even is as this to get it. Translators had to be part word nerd, part deep thinker, part cultural detective, decoding ideas baked in totally different worldviews. Hunayn ibn Ishaq, the goat of translators, had a system smoother than a Spotify playlist. Step 1, rough draft nailing the gist. Step 2, team up with native speakers to polish it, finding Arabic words that didn't just say the thing, but felt it. Step 3, beta test it, having other brainiacs read it and explain it back to make sure the big ideas didn't get lost in translation. This wasn't just copying homework, it was cultural wizardry, turning ancient brain candy into something Islamic scholars could remix and level up. Greek medicine got an Arabic glow-up with hospital-tested tweaks. Indian math sprouted into algebra and trig that'd make your calc teacher cry tears of joy. The scholars were a diversity poster's dream team. Arab philosopher Al-Kindi was dropping hot takes on everything from math to music theory like a medieval Reddit AMA. Persian genius Al-Razi was revolutionizing medicine by saying, let's actually test this stuff, inventing clinical trials before they were cool. Christian translator Hunayn ibn Ishaq saw zero beef between his faith and his nerdery. Jewish thinker Maimonides was blending Aristotle with theology, dropping truth bombs that shaped Islamic and Christian thought for ages. What glued them together wasn't religion or hometown pride. It was the vibe that knowledge is the ultimate slay, and studying the world was like high-fiving the divine, no matter your deity of choice. They collabed with the chill teamwork modern profs only dream of, despite lacking Slack or Zoom to smooth things over. Mornings at the house were for translation grind when brains were sharp and sunlight made tiny Greek squiggles readable. Afternoons when Baghdad's heat hit oven mode were for spicy debates and seminars where scholars pitched their latest hot takes, getting either a standing ovation or a verbal smackdown in the group chat peer review. Evenings at the House of Wisdom were for the nerdy grind of copying and preserving texts, a tedious hustle to save priceless knowledge from fire's floods or the slow nibble of time. The vibe was like a soft jam session, reed pens whispering across paper ink pots, clinking gently finished pages, rustling as they dried. It was ASMR for the medieval scholar set. Copying was no joke. One wrong squiggle could tank a math proof or twist a philosophy hot take, sending future brainiacs down a rabbit hole of oops. Scribes were focus ninjas taking timed stretch breaks, double-checking each line like it was a nuclear code, and sometimes teaming up so one could read aloud while the other scribbled like a scholarly podcast recording. The real glow-up, though, was their knowledge organization game. Librarians whipped up cataloging systems so slick you could find texts on any topic faster than a Google search. They cross-referenced authors, whipped up bibliographies, wrote Cliff's Notes style abstracts, and pen-palled with other libraries to hunt down rare scrolls. It was like they invented the Dewey Decimal System on steroids. The math coming out of the house would have made Greek geometry nerds proud, then sad realizing they were playing checkers while these guys were inventing chess. Al-Khwarizmi, vibing with Indian number systems, cooked up problem-solving methods. So clutch, we named algorithm after him, talk about leaving a legacy. His algebra book, Al-Jabr Reunion of Broken Parts, gave us tools that'd later power everything, from bridges to Bitcoin. Back then, though, he was just a dude doodling symbols, chasing elegant ways to wrangle unknown numbers. Astronomy was just as wild. Islamic stargazers didn't just copy Greek planets. Due to this theories, they built observatories and clocked their own data, crafting models that actually matched the sky. Nighttime observatory vibes. Pure magic astrolabes clicking like medieval fidget spinners. Styluses scratching precise measurements, astronomers muttering as they checked math against star charts. Al-Battani nailed the solar year's length so close to modern numbers, it's spooky. Ibn al-Haytham cracked how eyes work, setting the stage for telescopes and microscopes. These weren't just thought experiments, they were hands-on hacks that flipped how we grok the universe. Medicine in the Islamic Golden Age was like a med school drama with ancient swagger. Al-Razi's patient notes read like modern case files. Dude's got a fever. Tried, this herb didn't work, noted. He was all about watching testing and owning it when stuff flopped. Islamic hospitals like Baghdad's Bamaristan were game changers, mixing patient care, med student training, and research. Students shadowed pro-docs, got hands-on with patients, and nerded out over texts blending Greek, Persian, Indian, and Arabic know-how. The hospital library was a medical Wikipedia probably outclassing anything else on the planet. Hospital air was a potion of herbal meds, rosewater wound cleaners, plant extracts for specific ailments, and incense to keep things fresh. Sounds docs whispering case deets, pens scratching notes, and chill chats between healers and patients from all over like a multilingual ER episode. Philosophy from this brainy bubble was a wild ride trying to mash up different reality flavors. Islamic thinkers grabbed Greek logic but had to wrestle with monotheistic curveballs. Aristotle never saw coming like, how's God all-knowing if we've got free will, or can brainpower decode divine truths, Al-Farabi Ibn Sina. Avicenna and Ibn Rushd Averroes dropped systems so deep they didn't just shape Islamic thought. They gave Christian and Jewish brainiacs new toys too. Their stuff got Latinized and became Euro-Uni must-reads, paving the way for the Renaissance. The wildest part. These guys saw zero beef between logic and faith. They treated both like different apps for the same OS, betting that reason's truths would vibe with divine ones. That confidence let them chase knowledge like it was a treasure hunt, no stress about rocking the religious boat. The Islamic Golden Age didn't crash overnight. It fizzled, then got KO'd. Political drama split the empire, draining cash from brainy projects to swords and shields. Money got tight, so research took a back seat to army bills. Some religious hardliners started side-eyeing Greek philosophy and science, worried it'd mess with the old-school faith vibe. Then 1258's Mongol invasion delivered the final gut punch. Hulagu Khan's crew rolled into Baghdad, allegedly chucking so many books into the Tigris, the river turned black with ink. The House of Wisdom got torched, scholars scattered or snuffed manuscripts reduced to ash or lost forever. But the knowledge didn't totally ghost. Islamic Spain kept the nerd flame alive for centuries. Fleeing Baghdad scholars smuggled their brainpower to other hubs. Most clutched the translations and OG works from the Golden Age, got Latinized, fueling Europe's Renaissance. When Renaissance Euros rediscovered Greek smarts, they weren't cracking open dusty originals. They were reading Latin versions of Arabic translations, often beefier than the OGs, because Islamic scholars had spent ages tweaking and leveling them up. Euro-Unis teaching Aristotle. That was Islamic Aristotle with extra sauce. Algebra in Europe. Straight-up Islamic math, no Greek roots. Star charts built on Islamic stargazing that made Ptolemy look like a rookie. The scientific revolution that flipped Europe's worldview stood on Baghdad's shoulders, where a multicultural nerd squad translated, preserved, and souped up human knowledge. The House of Wisdom was a time and culture-spanning hyperlink, ferrying ancient brain bling into the modern world. Now as we surf our info-drenched age, dodging fake news, drowning in data, and trying to get global brainiacs to play nice across borders. Baghdad's scholars are straight-up hashed inspo. They proved knowledge doesn't care about your passport if you're down to learn from each other. They showed saving old wisdom is the launch pad for new winds. They built a vibe where diverse hot takes and spicy debates birthed the best ideas. In our era of instant Google and Wikipedia overload, let's tip our hats to those lamp-lit translators and researchers who spent years grinding to keep knowledge alive. They remind us that stacking up smarts is a team sport, needing lone geniuses, fat budgets, curious brains, and chill vibes for different views. The House of Wisdom got smoked 8 centuries ago, but its ghost haunts every lab library and Zoom call where folks from all corners team up to push the edges of what we know, one geeky breakthrough at a time. We're yeeting from Baghdad's nerdy scroll party to Rapa Nui, aka Easter Island, a tiny volcanic zit in the Pacific so far from anything that its closest neighbor over 200 miles away might as well be on another planet. This speck, 14 miles long, 7 wide, is where Polynesians pulled a wild flex. They littered it with nearly 1,000 giant stone heads that stare into the void like they're waiting for Uber to show up. The moai. They're the kind of mystery that makes archaeologists chug coffee at midnight scratching their heads. Easter Island's the ultimate why'd you even move? You could lap it in a lunch break, but good luck ignoring the 1002-ish statues sprinkled around like a Titan's art project. These moai range from 6 to 30 feet tall, weighing 14 to 52 tons like the smaller ones, match a loaded U-Haul the big boys rival a friggin' jet. And here's the kicker that keeps diggers up at night. The Rapa Nui carved and hauled these chonks with stone tools, no wheels, no oxen, and zero hints on how you drag a house-sized rock miles across bumpy land without a crane. The islands plopped in the Pacific like a lonely emoji in a group chat. Nearest neighbors Pitcairn Island 1, 200 miles off, with fewer folks than your average condo complex. Rapa Nui was lonely. ISS astronauts have better Wi-Fi and are only 250 miles from a burger. Today, it's a treeless sea of grass with volcanic humps poking up like chilled giants napping in the green. The wind's always vibing, tossing ocean salt, and grass whispers, "Your way." It's hauntingly pretty, but the kind of pretty that screams, "You're so alone out here, bro." Polynesians rolled up between 700 and 1200 CE, pulling off a navigation stunt that makes Columbus look like he got lost in a parking lot. They crossed thousands of miles in outrigger canoes, using stars, waves, and bird vibes as their GPS, basically a PhD in ocean whispering without the student loans. When they landed, Easter Island was no barren, sad sack. It was a lush palm jungle with trees over 80 feet tall, swaying in the breeze, seabirds squawking like a rowdy bar, and waves smacking cliffs that were probably shaggier with green than today's bald rocks. The sound palms rustling birds, partying ocean, roaring a tropical mixtape. Early Rapa Nui folks built a tight society in this nowhere paradise, with zero escape routes. No neighbors to trade with, no backup. If crops flopped, they had to make this rock work or bust. And for centuries, they slayed it. Population hit maybe 15,000 wild for an island smaller than your county fairgrounds. They cooked up a slick farming game with sweet potatoes, chickens, and hardcore gardening hacks that squeezed max juice from their tiny turf. Their society was fancy with chiefs, priests, artisans, and rituals that glued everyone together like a spiritual group chat. But the moai, their ultimate glow-up and obsession. Starting around 1250 CE, they churned out these statues at Rano Raraku, a volcanic crater turned stonehead factory. Imagine the scene: hundreds of carvers hammering away stone tools, clinking like a prehistoric drumline, the quarry buzzing like a rock star workshop. Carving was straight-up Stone Age sorcery. Using basalt tools, teams spent months chiseling each moai, sculpting those long faces, big schnozzes, and what you looking at stares that scream iconic. The precision was chef's kiss, none of your lumpy caveman nonsense, but legit art with crisp details holding up after 800 years of salty wind and rain. The quarry smelled like volcanic dust, sweaty grind, sharpened tools, and probably campfire smoke from lunch breaks. Visually, a trippy lineup of half-done heads poking out of the rock like a Stone Age Funko Pop assembly line. Carving was only half the flex, then they had to move these beasts some trekking 10 miles over terrain that'd trip a mountain goat. This is where the mystery gets spicy enough to give modern engineers nightmares. Old-school eggheads said they used wooden rollers, ramps, and armies of haulers like dragging a mega sled. But new experiments dropped a wilder plot twist the moai might have walked. Researchers got replica moai to waddle upright by rocking them with ropes like a coordinated tick-tock dance. It needs fewer folks than sledding skips the tree chopping, and explains why so many moai on ancient roads are standing not flopped over like failed furniture moves. Picture a 14-ton statue strutting across the island, an ancient spectacle that'd make you drop your sweet potato and clap. It was human ingenuity turning boulders into backup dancers. The moai weren't just tossed around like lawn ornaments. They were placed with cosmic precision, vibing with star alignments, tribal turf, and holy mojo. Most face inland, keeping an eye on their peeps like stone babysitters. But the 7 at Ahu Tongariki, the island's biggest statue stage, stare at the ocean, maybe waiting for a cosmic Postmates delivery, or just flexing Rapa Nui swagger to the endless blue. Each moai rocked a pukao, a fancy red stone hat carved from scoria, weighing a few tons like a cherry on a giant sundae. These weren't just bling. They were stone versions of the red feather crowns Polynesian chiefs flexed, turning the moai into ancestor avatars, keeping tabs on their kids. Hoisting these multi-ton toppers onto 30-foot statues, that's a flex so wild it'd make modern crane operators sweat through their hard hats. The AHU platforms, where moai chill, were straight-up architectural bangers. Built from stone blocks, some over 10 tons, they were statue stages and holy party spots for rituals. The stonework's so tight, it'd make Inca masons nod in respect. You couldn't slide a credit card between those joints. Then around 1600 CE, the moai grind screeched to a halt. Rano Raraku Quarry got ghosted with nearly 400 statues left half done, like the crew clocked out mid-shift and never came back. Some moai were still stuck in the rock mid-carve. Others were finished but stranded, standing like a stone army waiting for an Uber that flaked. What went down old school story blames an eco faceplant. Moai mania chewed through trees for rollers ramps and ropes like a lumberyard on Black Friday. The growing population cleared forests for farms, turning the island into a bald hipster. No trees meant eroding soil tanking crops, and no surplus to fund the let's move another giant head lifestyle. The moai stopped, not because folks got bored, but because they were too busy scrounging sweet potatoes to play statue Tetris. When the collapse hit, it was a brutal speed run. Digs show Rapa Nui splintered into clans scrapping over scraps. Many moai got yeeted face first in the chaos, flopped like drunk titans. Ahu platforms were raided, their primo stones recycled for basic survival builds. From a peak of maybe 15,000, the population crashed to 2,000 to 3,000, scraping by on an island stripped like a Black Friday Walmart. The society that dropped one of archaeology's dopest flexes was reduced to survival mode, no budget for big dreams. When Euros first rolled up on Easter Sunday 1722, hence the name, they found a scrappy crew on a treeless rock, surrounded by ruins, screaming, "We used to be that civilization." The moai wowed them, but they couldn't wrap their heads around how a fancy society popped off, then poofed on this nowhere island with zero resources. Easter Island's tale is the ultimate don't mess with Mother Nature PSA. A warning about chasing clout like bigger moai while ignoring the dirt and trees that keep you fed. It's the poster child for what happens when you YOLO your ecosystem for short-term flexes. But new digs spice up the plot. Euro diseases might have kneecapped the population more than deforestation. Slave raids in the 1860s snatched heaps of locals. Climate shifts could have made farming a nightmare. The collapse might not be a tidy you cut too many trees fable, but a messy mix of bad luck and worse choices with Rapa Nui folks adapting as best they could. What's crystal clear? The moai are a jaw-dropping win. nearly 1,000 megasculptures, each screaming human grit art vibes, and we did what with stone tools, swagger crafted by a tiny crew on Earth's most middle-of-nowhere rock. Now with restored moai standing tall again, Easter Island's a trippy stroll among stone giants, eyeballing a landscape that keeps its T close. They loom against the Pacific's endless blue, their "I know something you don't" smirks, hinting they've seen the highs and lows of human hustle. The wind still whips, tossing ocean salt and grass whispers, but it's also carrying eternal questions. How'd they pull it off? Why go so hard? And what's the takeaway from a civilization that slayed so big, then ate it so hard on a speck at the world's edge? We're bouncing from Easter Island's moody stone squad to a cozy rewind of tonight's epic saga, like flipping through a history book written by a time-traveling comedian. We've got Inuit ice wizards, Cleopatra's political plot twists, Gandhi's salty stroll, Angkor's jungle architects, Antarctic ice racers, Aztec lake gardeners, Silk Road dealmakers, Baghdad's nerd convention, and Rapa Nui's statue fanatics. Each yarn flung across maps and centuries screams one thing: humans are wild, always adapting, dreaming, and yeeting past impossible, like it's a speed bump. As you snuggle into your toasty bed surrounded by Wi-Fi and snacks, these old-school legends are still dropping wisdom bombs about what it means to hustle in a world that's both a banger and a breakable toy. The Inuit whipping up ice cribs in Arctic quiet hit us with the truth. Home ain't a zip code, it's the vibe you build when survival's a team sport. In their igloos warmed by breath, body heat, and seal oil. Glow-ups, they showed comforts not about gadgets, but about vibing with the world, not throwing punches at it. Cleopatra's saga slaps across time like a reminder that brains and hustle can rocket you to the stars, but even the slickest schemers get curveballed by life's chaos. In Alexandria's fancy halls where papyrus fumes mixed with scholarly shade, she proved real power's not in tanks or gold, it's in speaking someone's language, getting their dreams and dreads and making them feel seen. Gandhi's chill trek to the seas, a vibe check for our TikTok speed world. Real change isn't a viral moment or a mic drop, it's the boring, stubborn grind that looks like a snooze from the outside. His dusty Gujarat footprints scream. Sometimes the ultimate power move is just saying nah to systems that treat folks like NPCs. Angkor's builders, juggling waterstone and monsoon beats, dropped a city so eco-friendly it'd make modern planners cry into their blueprints. With canals humming and temples sprouting like jungle BFFs, they showed civilization can be a nature collab, not a cage match. Scott and Amundsen's South Pole Sprint. Two flavors of let's do the impossible. Scott leaned into tradition, honor, and suffering builds character, British tea vibes. Amundsen went full nerd prep tools efficiency. Both were brave AF, but only one clocked that nature doesn't care about your vibe check. It just asks if you packed the right gear. The Aztec engineers' floating gardens like lake-based magic tricks remind us the dopest tech looks like wizardry. Their chinampas blooming like green miracles proved tight spots, breed slick fixes way cooler than anything you'd dream up with endless resources. Silk Road merchants schlepping luxe swag across death-trap deserts were globalization's OGs, showing humans will cross hell for a cool scarf from far away. Their camel bells jingling in the sandy void say, trade's not just cash, it's our itch to peek over the horizon and say, yo, what's good? Baghdad's scholars grinding by lamplight to save ancient smarts, drop a truth bomb for our meme-flooded age. The realist works the quiet stuff, understanding, preserving, stacking knowledge like Jenga. Their pens scratching their multilingual nerd huddles showed what happens when brainiacs from all corners team up for the win. Rapa Nui's stone carvers churning out 1,000-ish megaheads on Earth's loneliest rock left the spookiest memo. Their moai eyeballing the Pacific like moody bouncers scream ambition. And oops. They say you can crush the impossible, but every W comes with a bill you might not see till it's too late. These tales, woven like a dope ancient quilt, sketch a human vibe check. We're dream-chasing, problem-solving weirdos, equal parts genius and who let us drive. We build ice castles, lake cities, and stone squads that outlast empires. But we also fumble hard enough to unravel centuries of hustle. What ties it all together? Humans at our A-game turn no way in to watch this with grit smarts and sheer I'm not quitting energy. The Inuit didn't KO the Arctic, they waltzed with it. The Aztecs didn't brawl with the lake, they high-fived it. Baghdad's scholars didn't gatekeep knowledge, they slung it across borders like intellectual confetti. In our TikTok-scrolling, climate-fretting, tweet-battling era, when problems like global warming wealth gaps, political shade-throwing, and AI side-eye feel like a boss fight with no save point, these ancient OGs drop both chill pills and cheat codes. They remind us humans have always stared down game over screens, climate chaos, inequality, you name it, and somehow mashed the right buttons, whether through squad goals, lone wolf brilliance, or just clocking that thriving needs both street smarts and wild dreams. As sleep wraps you up like a burrito in a toasty blanket, let these tales marinate in your snooze fest. Picture Arctic winds jamming with Aztec canoe splashes. Hear medieval scribes' pen scratches vibing with Silk Road camel bells. Feel Gandhi's dusty march syncing with Cleopatra's silk robe swish. These aren't just dusty history memes, they're your VIP invite to dream up what's next. Every app making your life a breeze. Every gadget you don't even think about, every bridge patching up beefy communities, every fix for no one-way problem starts with some rando squinting at the world and going, this doesn't have to suck forever. In your dark, cozy room, you're linked to a hype chain of human hustle, stretching back to the first dude who saw snow and thought condo material, the first gal who saw a lake and yelled city foundation, or the first rebel who saw a zillion miles and said, bet I'll walk it. Your brain's got the collected XP of generations who tackled their dramas with the same hope and hustle combo you're rocking. Easter Island's wind still hums with the clink of ancient chisels. Lake Texcoco's ghost waters remember Aztec paddle vibes. Gandhi's roads still thump with revolution sneakers. Arctic ice holds Inuit hacks that turned Earth's worst neighborhood into a homey vibe. And in your chill breathing as you drift off in the wild fact that you're chilling in a comfy bed. Hearing global sagas from forever ago, you're part of that same epic grind, the human quest to turn impossible into done deal. One dream, one hack, one bold move at a time. Crash hard knowing tomorrow's a fresh shot to scribble the next page in this human hype novel. Those ancient voices are still hyping you up across time, whispering, yo, impossible, just means not yet nailed. In your dreams, strut with Gandhi's chill flex, with Baghdad's scholar swag hustle, like the Inuit's ice architects, and roll with the quiet flex of every OG who showed impossible who's boss. They turned Arctic ice, floating farms, deserts, and lonely islands into home, proving the human spirit, when it's on, can pimp out any vibe. These tales snooze now, but they're never over. They live in every homie picking guts over easy street creativity, over cookie-cutter hope, over meh. As darkness tucks you in, know you're starring in this epic bonkers tale of being gloriously, hilariously human. Sweet Z's Squad. The grind drops fresh tomorrow.